Hello. All right. It looks like some of you are here already. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat. Anyone here? I'm going to put on some chapstick so I don't keep biting my lips. I see some people are here. Say hello if you are. All right. Hey, Jules. Hi, Jacob. Hi, Karen. Good to see all of y'all. All right. Hello, Faith. Hi, Jesse. How's everyone doing tonight? So I'm going to be answering your questions about querying and comp titles and writing and whatever you have questions about. So it's pretty much just like I'll answer your questions. I don't have any planned content. So hi, Anna. Oh, hello, PSC. And Jacob, I already said hi. Yeah, so feel free to start dropping your comments or your questions in there. Karen, I'm glad you're awake. Karen told me she would be here as long as she was still awake. And so as a reminder, I represent middle grade, young adult, all fiction genres, and then adult science fiction fantasy and adult romance. And I don't really do graphic novels. And my internship was in an adult mystery, so I'm pretty comfortable in that area too. Hi, Adriana. Is it Adriana or Adriana? Faith, I'm here. Me too. It's been quite a week with the PRH DOJ trial and other things going on. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, okay. Anna asks if a manuscript is part of a mentorship, what's the best way to mention that in a query? Yeah, so most people will mention it kind of at the end where you would put your bio section, but you can also put it, where you put your like title and word count, which a lot of people put that at the beginning. Some people put it at the end. I like at the beginning, but also it's not one of those things that like matters a whole lot either way. Especially because Inquiry Manager, especially because I already have word count and genre at the top. But yeah, you can just say this manuscript was edited during the XYZ mentorship program. Pretty simple. Hello, Darianne. Agree. Adriana? Oh, like some people just call you Adri? Adri? Hi, Jake. Okay, Faith asks, I see so many different guidelines on synopses from 1 to 2 pages, from 500 to 800, as words as different maxes, from voice to dry, from bare bones to tell every arc. Help. Yeah, so unless a person specifies, and some of them do specify, mainly what they're looking for is like a roughly 2 pages synopsis. It's not like no one's counting. In Query Tracker, you can't even tell how long it is, to be honest. And keep in mind that if someone asks for a 1-page synopsis, they're usually asking for single space. And if they're asking for a 2-page or more synopsis, they're asking usually for double spaced. So 1-page synopsis and a 2-page synopsis are the same length. But all right, Audrey. Oh, okay. So like by the way, I am very easily distracted today. So if I jump around, I am so sorry. And if I like stop answering your question, don't go back in the middle because I got distracted. Just let me know in the comments because I'm very like, I don't know, manic or something today. But I was gonna say, so like my grandma was named Audrey. So it sounds similar to that, but like Audrey. All right, back to the synopsis question. Yeah, so length doesn't matter too much unless they're specifically asking for like a 5 page or a 10 page synopsis. Then you know that they want like a a much more detailed synopsis than you would generally send with a query. Um, some people will say that it needs to be voicey. I disagree with that. I think making a synopsis voicey makes it less um efficient. And to me, a synopsis is an efficient way for me to know what happens in the story and make sure it has a good arc and it makes sure it has a good character arc. And so I think trying to add voice in it to kind of like loosens up the word count a little bit. Um, but the main thing, like, we just need to know, does the story make sense from beginning to end? Does it, not change genres 70% of the way through, which I had that experience once. Um, like it went from like a kind of like fun steampunky book to like a weird body horror about 70% of the way through. And that was not a good experience. And I wish I hadn't read the whole manuscript before I get to the point. My eyes look a little red. I don't know why. I am tired. Um, yeah, so you're mainly going to focus on the main arc and the main character arc as well. So you don't have to tell every arc unless you are asked for one of those longer synopses. Jules asks, I realize I haven't been showing the questions, so I'm going to show the questions now. How would you query an agent if a publisher the author already works with is interested in buying next fiction book on proposal? Oh, on proposal. That's a little bit different. Okay. That's interesting. That's an interesting yeah, so proposal, fiction book on proposal is usually a short description, a synopsis, and a couple of chapters. So honestly, you could just fill out the query form in most cases, like you would, and just include in the query letter and say, I work with XYZ publisher and they're interested in acquiring my next book. It's not written yet, but here's the proposal. They want to acquire a proposal. Just kind of explain the situation. And I feel like most agents will be open to that, even if, because it's not like you're trying to query on proposal without that. But then in the same instance, like, you need to give some kind of indication on like, are you for sure going to take that offer from that publisher if they offer? Or are you interested in other publishers? Like, kind of how set are you on that decision? Because it is going to impact the agent's decision. Because for a lot of agents, going with a very small press that doesn't offer advances, they may decide that it's not worth their time. And also, like, as a newer agent, I'm very cognizant of this idea in online writing spaces where if an agent is only selling to publishers that you don't need an agent to sell to, then they're like a bad agent or they're not a good enough agent or whatever. And so even newer agents sometimes like won't necessarily take the kind of guaranteed deal in that situation because they know that that's what people perceive, even though it's not necessarily the truth. But yeah, public perception has gotten a little wild when it comes to the agenting world recently. I hope that answered your question, Jules. Let me know if it didn't. Darianne, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on POV for middle grade. Is third person past dead? Is it all first person now? I think you can do any POV in middle grade. Like second is hard, of course, to sell, but I think it's wide open. Oh, Audrey, yes. Okay, cool. Jesse said, what are some of the biggest things that put you off an author as an agent in terms of behavior? Like any of the isms, really. I feel like this is a pretty obvious one, but like, racism, ableism, misogyny, that kind of thing. And sometimes you do especially see misogyny or kind of like casual ableism in query letters. So those are the big ones that I feel like seem a little obvious. But even not in query letters, like sometimes before I decide to offer, I may go check out the author's social media and make sure that I'm not going to, how do I say this? Like delicately. Like it's not going to be someone that I'm going to be uncomfortable working with because of my own identities. Um, that's pretty much it. I do check out social media sometimes. And so sometimes if you see an author who seems like just very reactionary and very kind of like a little, like you might be worried about their public behavior based on their social media. Sometimes that can be like a little bit of a yellow flag, I guess. Does that make sense? Jacob asks, is it appropriate to mention that my manuscript is own voices in the query letter? Yeah, so there's been a lot of discussion around the term own voices. The main problem, I think, came, and the reason why so many people are kind of turning against own voices, the phrase, is because publishers were using it as like a marketing thing. And that was like, just felt like it wasn't really in the spirit of what, was originally intended. So I do think it's fine, totally fine for an author to say that about themselves if they would like. You can also phrase it another way in your query. You can say something like, the main character shares XYZ identity with me. My main character has dyslexia and it's based on my experience as a dyslexic person, that kind of thing. I see people phrase it that way as well. But you can always say its own voices. What I recommend, though, is just to indicate what is own voices for. So especially if you have a character who might have like multiple different things that might be considered own voices, and you only share one or two of them, you want to like make sure that you mention that. All right. I'm going to take a sip of water real quick. When you have a new book ready to query, but it's a pandemic, so a few people still got your old book, do you have to withdraw or can you just start querying the new book? So it depends. So almost every question, by the way, the answer is going to be it depends. So sorry about that. But so take a look at the agent, see what their kind of response times have been like. You can sometimes find it on Query Tracker where people have been saying when they queried and when they got a response back. Look at their website. What do they say? Do they say, if you don't hear from me within 6 months, consider it a no? Then obviously you can count that as passed. If an agent is taking as long as you have had a query out with them to respond, then I would not consider that closed, and so you would have to close that to query them a new book. Or you can query other agents and still wait for the ones that still have it. Yeah, you can query the new book and to different agents who don't still have the first book while you're waiting for those agents to respond on the first book. If it's been over a year, I would assume that it's closed, even though when I was querying, and it wasn't even as bad as it is now, but when I was querying, I definitely received query rejections like a year and a half, 2 years later. So it's not always closed, but Karen, hello. I revised my manuscript as the age was weird. Protagonist 13, but subject YA. Yes, that usually isn't an easy sell. Some big changes throughout, but the premise hasn't changed. Can I requery agents? No one asked for a partial or full. So I am always okay with people requiring me if they feel like they've made a changes big enough that might change my decision, especially because you did have one of those things that might turn off an agent like immediately without really reading the query, the 13 as a Y in a YA. Then I think you're fine requiring, unless in the agent's guidelines it specifically says like not to do that. I know, like myself, I'm pretty open to requeries. I know Eric Smith for sure is open to requeries, but agents feel a wide variety of ways about this. Some are like much more like don't ever require me kind of situation, but I think especially a lot of the newer agents are open to it. But I mean, like, go ahead. Like, the worst they can do is say no. No one's going to blacklist you for querying them twice. And if they do, you don't want to work with them. They may blacklist you for querying like 7 times, but twice is fine. How often do queries with multiple books get accepted from a first-time author? For example, a 2-book series proposal. Queries, pretty much never. So a query should just be 1 book always. Now, if it's like a 2-book series, series are really hard except in middle grade right now. So it's better off if you can sell it as 1 book and then let them know like it has series potential or you have ideas for future books. Unless you're in middle grade, there are a lot of places specifically looking for middle grade series. But YA and adult, it is a little bit difficult. All right. But for a book deal, I did want to mention that. So like selling 2 books on a book deal is a little bit more common. It more likely happens when there's kind of an auction scenario, because that's one thing that a publisher might kind of throw into the mix to sweeten the deal from their side, is to sign you for a 2-book contract. But if it's not an auction, maybe not. All right. Faith asked about content warnings. Should I put them in the query, the synopsis, or with the full? I like them in the query, especially, I mean, if the content is in the sample pages, 100% put it in the query. If the content is not in the sample pages, then it's like, it kind of depends. You probably want to include it if it's like something kind of major. Like if there's, for example, like a huge thread of like parent death or cancer or something like that, you may want to put that in the query if it's something that's going to impact the agent's ability to read the full. But if it's a kind of smaller thing and you may want to do it when the full is requested. I have a spot on my query form for content warnings. And so I recommend that you put everything there. Some people will indicate which things are in the sample and which things are not. And I like that. So that's another option you could do in your query. You could say content warning, this is what's in the sample and this is what's in the full. And, put it at the end. It doesn't have to be right up front. And I will say I've seen a lot of like chatter about content warnings, and a content warning isn't going to make, in most cases, someone not read the book. It's not going to make someone not interested in the book. And if it is, it should be on their kind of wish list. Mine is. I do have one in there that's a hard no for me. It's just like it helps the person prepare to be in a good mental space to read it. So, for example, I asked for content warnings specifically for OCD behaviors. And I would love to represent a book with an accurate OCD character. But if I am not in a good mental space and I read a character with an OCD behavior that is very similar to one of mine, it can often it can be triggering for me, like I can kind of go in a little bit of a spiral. So that's why I asked for that, just so like if I know that I'm not in a good space, I'll skip that and I'll read it the next day. All right. When you query, do agents consider a novel even if it's short in word count? I'm finishing contemporary fantasy YA. It may only be 70,000. I wanted to reach 80,000. What should I do? 70,000, I feel like you're in a pretty good space. If you're querying a contemporary fantasy YA and it's below 55, that's probably when I would start worrying. Yeah, but 70 is fine. Though, to answer your first question without your context, sometimes if it's just like a shockingly low word count, like if you query a YA fantasy and it's not in verse and you say it's 30,000 words, that's gonna almost likely be a no, unless it's just like the best writing I've ever seen in my entire life. Same, with like adult genres, but I feel like 70, you're safe. It does seem like a little bit short, and I would be like, oh, does this properly build the world and everything? But also, if I really love the book, then that's something that we can work on too. Jules, I'm glad that answered your question. All right, Audrey. Originally from Brazil, English is my second language. Background in engineering. I also have background in engineering. So I suffer from imposter syndrome. We all do. I see writers post that they sent out 70 queries. Should I really send that many? Yes, but not all at once. And so I recommend, which is a pretty common method, doing, 10, 15, 20 at a time, depending on what genre you're in, and seeing what the response comes back on that. If you're getting a lot of requests, and people seem to really like it, especially, if you're getting a lot of requests, especially in a situation where you're sending pages already, like if you're sending 3 chapters or whatever and you're getting a lot of requests, I would query more, because that means obviously there's going to be a lot of people interested. And so you might want to like get them out there, so that if there is interest, then you have kind of the widest possibility, and make sure you get the agent that you want to work with. If you send out 10, 15, 20 queries and you're seeing like kind of no response or all no's, then that's a sign for you to kind of like go back and look and see what's going on. Side note, I am teaching a workshop in November from Free Expressions. It's called Fine Tuning Your Submission Package to Get to Yes. And it is for people who are kind of like, feel like they're close or almost there. They know how to write a query letter. It's not Query Letters 101. And they, they feel pretty confident about their writing, but they're not seeing the results they'd like to see. So check that out. It's from Free Expressions. I'll be able to put a link later. If you're interested, let me know. But yeah, so and it, like I said, it depends on your genre. Like some genres, there are a lot fewer agents that take that genre just because it's a smaller market, right? So if you're querying, like, for example, YA contemporary, YA fantasy, that's a huge market, huge market. There are a lot of agents that take it. If you're querying contemporary romance, also a huge market, a lot of agents who take it. So you probably have like 100 plus legitimate agents that you could send that to. Whereas if you're doing something a little more niche, some kind of like subject specific nonfiction, or cozy mystery, is a pretty small field as well, then you're probably not going to be able to send out 100 queries. So your query pool might be smaller in that situation. But then also there are new agents coming on board like every week, it seems like. So you may be able to kind of do a rolling thing and just like see who's accepting now. Hi William, thank you for joining us. Darren asked, do you like it when someone mentions in their query that the full manuscript is under consideration by other agents, or does that bother you? It doesn't bother me necessarily, but I am also like, I try to give writers as much grace as possible. Like, I remember what it was like querying. I queried several books before I got my agent. And so like I always try to think back on that situation. But I don't need to know it, and it's not necessary. And I do think it's a little weird sometimes when people include it, because it just doesn't matter. Like I am going to assume that if I like the book, that other agents like the book and have requested the full as well. I feel pretty confident in my tastes to assume, that if I like the book, someone else has liked the book as well. So all right, PSC asks, what are the pros and cons of querying an agent who is not from your home country? For example, are they going to care about bringing the book out in the author's home country? So it's not care, it's more of like, agents only work in certain markets, right? So like most American agents really only work in the American and the Canadian markets. And we have entire foreign rights teams who sell the books to other countries after they sell in the American market. So you want to make sure that you are querying agents who work and sell books in your market. And that's not like international rights versions of books that have already been sold in America, because that's like a different process. So if you want to make sure that you're getting published in your country, you're probably going to want to look for agents in your country. I do know some writers, very few, it's not a common thing, who have an American agent and also an agent from another country. But those are particularly, especially bilingual authors who write in both English and their usually native language is what is happening there. Though sometimes it's American writers or French American writers or whatever who are writing in both languages, and they'll have agents in each country because they want to sell in both those countries and can write in both of those languages. They don't need a translator, that kind of thing. But yeah, you want to make sure that the agent that you get is selling books in the country that you want to be published in, whatever country that may be. For contemporary romance, what is a bigger issue for you, low or high word count? Generally, high is a bigger issue. I mean, like, it depends on what you mean by low, but like you can sell a romance at like 45K to the right publisher if it's like the right style of romance. So but you cannot sell a romance like over 95K unless it's just like, again, the best thing you've ever read. And also, it really depends on the manuscript as well. Like if it seems to have a low word count, but I see immediately where we could add more depth, then that's easier, right? If it is a really high word count and I can spot like entire threads, entire scenes that I feel like we can remove without making a lot of major changes to the story, then that's kind of like a no big deal. If the romance is over like 110K, though, that's really hard. How well do short story collections do for submissions? Are they received well? Thank you for doing this. So I don't do short story collections for the most part. Like if a client that I'd signed for a novel wanted to do a short story collection, that would be a different story. But I don't really take submissions for short story collections. I feel like that is probably most common in literary fiction, which I don't do at all. So I'm sorry I don't have like really good answers for you here. Sometimes it does happen in science fiction and fantasy as well. But it is I think it is harder to sell a short story collection than a novella or a novel. I mean, but I mean, if it's something you want to do and you have the stories, like you might as well try, right? I always think like you might as well try, unless it's just like really. I know some people it really impacts their mental health to keep hearing no a lot. So like as long as you feel like you're gonna be safe, like mental health wise, you might as well just try. That's what I always think. If a manuscript is solidly in genre fiction but written in a literary style, where does that fall in the I want literary commercial idea? So for the most part, it's not going to be for someone who says that they want commercial fiction primarily. Your sweet spot is someone who says that they want upmarket XYZ genre fiction. So if someone's saying they want upmarket science fiction, upmarket fantasy, upmarket YA, whatever it is, that's going to be your sweet spot. And there are a lot of people looking for that. So, but also, you actually are in a pretty good position if you do actually have a story like this where it is quite genre but also told in a literary style, because you can query all the agents who take literary fiction with speculative elements or whatever it may be. I'm assuming it's science fiction fantasy, but I don't know for that for sure. So I'm assuming, yeah, so you can query the agents that take literary fiction with speculative elements, and then you can also query the agents that take science fiction fantasy, but have a literary taste. So yeah, you're all over the place and you can query both. And also you'll see your agent will probably pitch to both. So I have a client that I adopted that's like an upmarket sci-fi with women's fiction elements. And so I have submitted to science fiction specific imprints. I've submitted to women's fiction specific editors, and I have submitted to did I mention it was like a mystery? So like mystery editors who take speculative elements. So which opens the door a little bit for us, but also a lot of like the places that just publish like straight up science fiction fantasy, like Bain or whatever, won't take, literary genre fiction. Let's see. Oh, I don't know. I know what super chat is, but I don't really know what it means. Miss Stevens said, I've heard not to query in August. Is that true? I don't think so. I don't like people say that, but honestly, a lot of agents check up or catch up on submissions in the summer because they can't submit to editors for the most part in the summer. I don't think there's any good or bad time to query because also most agents are not reading queries the day that they come in. So you could say like, oh, it's not good to query in July because editors or agents are on vacation in July. They're not reading queries. But most agents are like a month or two behind on queries anyway. So like if you submit in July, they're reading that in August or September. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. Time is a social construct. And if an agent doesn't want to receive queries in a specific month, they should be closing to queries for that time period. So I don't think it matters that much at all. And this week particularly, I have received multiple notifications of offers from authors who just queried me like a week ago. I don't know if they queried those other agents before they queried me and it just like was odd timing or whatever, but yeah, it doesn't matter. In short, let's see. Oh, the free expressions link. Okay, let me grab that for y'all real quick. I'm just going to send you the link to the whole series because I don't know if I can link to the individual workshop, but it's the one in November. All right. Is 120K words okay for adult science fiction with hard science elements? It's probably the most friendly genre for something that is over 100K, except adult fantasy. So it's not a hard no. It's kind of like it depends on the agent too. Like some agents are specifically looking for kind of the shorter science fiction, but I feel like that's pretty safe. If you think that you might be able to get it like closer to 100, that might be a little bit more favorable for you, but it's not a huge problem. Can you give advice on how to find a newer agent? Do you mean like an agent who is like newer to the business? I'm gonna wait until you clarify that question before I answer it. Like I said, it's not a huge problem. It just doesn't matter that much. William asked, is there a decent sized market for science fiction fantasy books with polyamorous romance elements or any market? Asking for a friend. Is that friend's name William? I mean, like, I will say, like, there's not as much space in the SFF market as there is for, a two-person cis het romance, but that's not anything that the queer community is unfamiliar with, right? So there are definitely places that are open to it. I've heard editors specifically ask for polyamorous relationships in science fiction fantasy. So there is a market for it. It's just like not going to be as open as a market as, the traditional whatever relationships. So Jacob, how do I learn to deal with rejection as a querying author? I don't know. I'm sorry. It's hard. I guess like the thing that I always try to say is like it's not personal. It's not even like that we don't like your writing. Sometimes it is. Sometimes we don't like your writing. And that's fine. There are like major bestseller. Like I cannot stand Dean Koontz writing, for example. Like, and he sold like a gazillion books. So it's not personal, and it's a matchup of tastes, and it's not that like we don't like you or you know that kind of thing. It's just like this isn't the right fit at the right time. And maybe it does mean that like you need to go back and work on your craft. I know for me, the first book that I queried, I definitely still had a lot of work to do on my craft, and I understand why that book didn't get picked up. But some people have a really good book. It just may not be the right market for it right now. There's like all these different factors, and it can be so frustrating because you feel like you don't have a lot of control over it. My main thing, I mean, like people always say, work on the next thing, control what you can while you're waiting for the responses that you can't control. Um, Jessica Lewis came on my podcast and she had a really great tip that I really liked, and I wish I had done this when I was querying. She had an email address set up just for querying. It's the only thing she used it for. And so, she didn't have it, on her phone. She didn't have notifications turned on, anything like that. So she only saw her responses whenever she felt like she was in a good place to see them. And like I mentioned on the episode of the podcast, I remember like one time I was out at a club with friends, and this was very early on before I got a hardened skin. And I got a rejection on a story that I was really hopeful about. And it like ruined my night because I was just like so upset, because I had the notifications on my phone. So it just popped up, and like you can see that preview the first couple sentences. And yeah, so that was one tip that I really, really liked on kind of like creating your own boundaries for querying. Uh, I mean, like another great way to handle it is like get friends who are in the same situation as you. When I was querying, we had a group in kind of like the South Orlando area, and we had a rejection club meeting. So it was like once a month, we would get together, and you could only come to the meeting if you had submitted something that month. And people like read their rejections and ripped them up, did whatever they wanted to do. And if you had an offer that month, you were supposed to like buy someone who got a rejection a drink. So friends are another great way to kind of go through that, whether they're online friends or in-person friends. And just like I want to reiterate, like it's nothing personal. There's actually someone in this chat who I really, really like as a person who has queried me, and the book just wasn't a good fit for me. I really, really wanted it to be a good match because I really like them and I think they're really cool. So it really is not personal, and especially in that situation. Jake asks if an agent has passed on previous works but presents an offer on a current manuscript, what happens with those other stories that they passed on earlier? Can they be revisited? It depends. I know I said that was going to be the answer to everything. I'm sorry. It is. So it kind of depends. Like, because a lot of times when we're reading queries and we're offering representation, we're looking for a book that is like a perfect match, right? And a lot of times with an existing client, they may come up with a book that is not a perfect match, but they're an existing client. You have established relationships, so you're going to try to work with them. However, sometimes an idea is just not sellable, right? And so that's going to be like a tough conversation on both sides as the agent is like, I don't think I can sell this. And also part of it too is like editors open our emails because they trust our taste, right? So if we have a book where we think is going to make an editor mistrust our taste, like we can't submit that out even as much as we want to help you, and so it really depends on like the situation. Sometimes also if you are in a situation where you do get an offer from a publisher after you've signed with an agent, they may be looking for a 2-book deal, and then you can like say, oh, I have this one that was the one that you queried recently or previously, and then and they may sign it, and then the agent doesn't have to deal with that book at all because then the editor edits it. So It really, really depends on the situation, why the book was rejected, what kind of shape it's in, that kind of thing. All right. Seen a lot of agents and editors mention wanting middle grade with lower word counts. I know middle grade has a large range, so what exactly are they looking for? Yeah, so I'm one of those agents that specifically requested middle grade books for reluctant readers, which have a lower word count, but that's not all that's involved in making a book for reluctant readers. Like, it has to be kind of really high concept. It has to hold the reader's attention, even though it's a shorter word count. It has to be just like, those books that just like you hear about them and like your just whole body wants to read that book, right? Like, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about reluctant readers. They have to be just really compulsively readable. And also have a lower word count. So I think that's a lot what it is. Also, middle grade word counts have just kind of like inched up over the past couple of years. So it's like not unheard of to see like a 65K middle grade. And honestly, that's a really long book, especially for a 12-year-old to read. And so I think a lot of it too is just kind of a response to seeing these middle grade word counts creep up. So I think like there's definitely a market for these really hooky like 35K middle grade books. I think I would especially love to see books in that range. In fact, I offered on one kind of ghosty one that I didn't get, and I'm very sad about. But yeah. Okay, yeah. So you wanted to know how to find agents who are newer to the business. So there's a website that does new agent alerts. I can't remember what it is right now. If someone in the comments knows, let me know. It's been a while. There are actually a couple websites that do new agent alerts. So subscribe. Okay, so Writer's Digest is new agent alerts. Yeah. Query Tracker has a new and updated literary agents page. Yeah, so you can Google new agent alerts and a couple different things come up. And a couple of Pinterest links. That's weird. Literary Rambles. Is Literary Rambles still around? They used to do them too. Yeah, so that's the main thing. Like, follow agencies on Twitter because they'll announce when they have a new agent that has joined their team. Any insights to which genres are in demand? No, all of them. It's a weird question to answer because there's always a market for every genre. There are obviously waves. Like paranormal romance is quite hard to sell in contemporary. In traditional publishing right now, but it's still a pretty big market. It's just like they're not taking a lot of new voices. I feel like at this point, YA sci-fi is really hard to sell. Those are the big ones in my categories. So adult dystopian is really hard to sell, especially. And plague books right now are very hard to sell. Everything else is kind of open game. Darian asks, how much does it matter to agents that someone was accepted into a mentorship program? So I have like this theory, right, in my head whenever I talk about queries and that kind of thing. So in order to get me to request a book to read on, I kind of think of it as like a point system. Like, if this is a genre that I'm looking at, it gets points. If it's if it has certain elements that I want, it gets points. If the query is really compelling, it gets points, right? And I have to have like so many points before I can move on. But those points can kind of like come from any situation. So I'll tell you about like an adult sci-fi that I read. I read the query and I was not interested at all. But I always read pages. Always read pages. Unless it's just like highly offensive concept. And it was like a well-written query, but it was just like, this isn't really my thing. And then I read the pages and like the first paragraphs were some of the most beautiful writing I've ever read. I requested that manuscript, so a mentorship program is just like another thing that might give you points. It's something that may, if an agent is reading a query and they're like, oh, I don't know about this, they may just take a little bit of a closer look at the pages, but it's not something that's going to turn something that's a no into a yes. It's just going to kind of make them sit up and pay a little bit more attention. PSC asks, what catches your attention during Twitter pitch events? Conflict and stakes. That's it. I do not do well with the pitches that are kind of like lists of elements. You know what I mean? You've probably seen those. They've gotten really trendy the last couple of years. Where it's like found family, bisexual witches, blah, blah, blah. For my brain does not work with that kind of thing, and I cannot put a cohesive like idea together in my head from those. So I do need like sentences. So I always recommend like vary your pitches up, because some people do really like those kind of list type pitches. And so in most contests, you're allowed several pitches. So like do a list pitch and then do like a more, kind of traditional sounding pitch at different times so that you kind of hit both of those preferences. The person who gets the most rejections in a year gets a cake. That's great. All right. Maybe piles. I don't really understand them. Why don't agents just reject a request right away? Do they go back and reread queries? What are they looking for? I don't really understand maybe piles either, actually. On queries, I should say. I do understand them on fulls because sometimes like you just need to think about it for a little bit. You may need to get a second read to see like, because I did that recently with like a book that I really, really liked the concept and the storytelling was great, but I still wasn't quite connecting to the book and I didn't know why. And so I asked one of our interns at the agency to read it, and she gave me this fantastic report. And she's like, the voice isn't there. And I didn't even realize it because like I was so engrossed in the idea, but that's exactly what it was. Like the voice wasn't there. So it did take me a little bit longer to respond to that one. I responded to a full that I had requested before responding to this one because of that. And I don't really do R&Rs like explicitly, but I do often, if I give a lot of feedback, I'll say like, oh, if you decide to revise in this vein, I would be happy to take another look. So that's like my version of R&R, but I feel like R&Rs put like way too much stress on writers. So I try not to do like the official version. But when it comes to maybe piles for queries, I don't really get them either. Sometimes though, when I'm reading queries, especially if I'm reading queries on my phone and it's kind of like a denser topic, like a heavier topic, for some reason those can't read them on my phone, so they'll go in a maybe pile for when I'm on my computer next. But that's like 2 days, so I don't feel like that's really counts. Are content warnings only needed for things that happen in the story on off page, or also needed for things at risk of happening that don't end up happening? It depends. So like I get a lot of content warnings that are like a sexual assault is attempted but thwarted. So something like that where maybe it starts but it doesn't go all the way. That's something that you may want to include. If like I don't know what another example might be, but like maybe if someone is worried, child endangerment is like a big one. So like obviously a child being killed is a big content warning. But a child endangerment is just as much so. So especially like new mothers, I don't know from experience, but like new mothers who have like postpartum or something, they cannot read child endangerment stories for the most part. So, something like that where it's like the child may die or may not die, that still needs a content warning. How polished does a manuscript have to be in order to submit it for a mentoring program? It depends. Some, I'm so sorry. I keep saying it depends, but it's true. Yeah, it does depend because some mentorships are more editorial focused than others. So But again, there's usually nothing stopping you from submitting again next year. So if you feel like you might have a chance, just go ahead and submit. It's fine. Just take a chance. Samantha, is this question about me? If an agent is closing to query soon and you want to query them, but your manuscript isn't polished, you gotta wait, right? Yes, you do. And yeah, because you don't want to like ruin that chance, right? Because you don't want to wait a month or in my case 6 weeks. I'm closing for 6 weeks. And I feel like honestly in publishing, 6 weeks is like nothing. Like it literally just goes by in a blink of an eye. So definitely wait. All right. I may just be able to take a couple more questions and we're going to go all night. For the newer agents, I didn't catch you slides you mentioned just now. Yeah, so I just literally Googled the words new agent alert. So, Writer's Digest and Query Tracker, which are both websites that if you are querying, you should know about. And if you don't, definitely go check them out. Query Tracker is by far my favorite place to find information about literary agents. Should a potty mouth character be added to a content warning field? I don't think so. But I was raised by a sailor who is also a mechanic. So I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this question because I curse like some people say so for me no, but Darian asks, what do you think is a solid request rate these days? I have no idea, honestly. I don't. um uh MV Pine on Twitter, not recently, it was like a year ago or more, did like a kind of Twitter survey and they gave out some interesting statistics. Um, I honestly don't know. I feel like it depends, like, right? Because if you're being like extremely targeted with your querying and you're only querying people that you think 100% is like a perfect match, then you're going to want a higher request rate than if you're just kind of querying everyone who you think might be interested in your book. That's going to obviously result in a lower request rate. So that's, I don't know the answer. I'm sorry. I don't know if anyone has like good stats on it, but if you do the query tracker, like paid service, I think they do have some stats like that. Anna asked, if you're split between two age categories, genres, how does that work with agents? Do you need an agent actively seeking repping both, or the writer will be expected to choose one? Yeah, so if you do write in two categories and genres, I would definitely prioritize agents who represent both. And even if they're not seeking both, like take a look at, what books they've sold. And if they've sold books in that age, in that category, that genre, that means that they're open to doing it for their clients. Even if they're not actively like accepting that genre. So I'll tell you the way that I answer this question when someone asks in the offer call, which you should always ask this question in the offer call, is I say, if it is, if it's, Jules said the query tracker is $25 a year and very much worth it. Yeah, you get a lot of different stats from there. Anyway, sorry, back to this topic. So what I usually say is something like, I represent middle grade of all genres, young adult of all genres, romance, adult romance, and adult science fiction fantasy. I am open to representing from my clients adult mysteries, adult thrillers, adult women's fiction. There's a huge crossover in editors who edit romance and women's fiction. And also I used to work in mystery. I also am personally interested in kind of commercial nonfiction. So if it was that situation where I was signing someone for, adult science fiction fantasy, but they were interested in commercial nonfiction, I would probably represent them for that. And then if it's just something I do not do, then we try to find someone in-house, another agent who might represent that genre. So for example, Natasha, my mentor at the agency, only does children's fiction, and she has a picture book author who's written a romance or is writing a romance actually. And so she had her send me the proposal for that romance, and I said, "Yeah, I love this. I would love to represent this." So Natasha's representing her kid lit fiction, and I'm representing her adult romance. Um, and then if it's something that just like no one in our agency does or will do, which I don't know exactly what that would be, then sometimes agent our authors will have two agents. They'll have, someone representing their something and then someone representing something else. But that's obviously like not an ideal situation, but it does happen. 6 weeks is doable. Yeah, so it's not too long. Darian, why do some deals get posted to PM and others don't? No one knows. No one. I'm sorry. No one knows. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm assuming that some don't get posted because the editor and the agent and the author, none of them care to post it because that's what like when you post a deal to PM, it can kind of be driven by any of those three people. The agent really wants to get on there, or the author really wants to get it on there, or the editor really wants to get it on there. And so if none of those people are interested in it, then they wouldn't submit it, and then it wouldn't go on there. Yeah, it's not just you. Actually, I think they mentioned this in that PRH DOJ trial. Okay. This is probably going to be our last question. Cecily asked, do you rep authors from the Caribbean? Similar relative to my answer earlier, if your goal is to be published in the United States, then yes. If your goal is to be published somewhere that is not the United States, if you don't want to be published in the United States, then no. Cool. I have a UK author that I represent who is primarily looking for publication in the US, but we do submit to UK publishers as well. All right. Well, thank you everyone for hanging out with me for an hour. And I try to schedule these occasionally. So, just keep an eye out on my Twitter or my YouTube, and I'll, do it whenever I can. I am closing to queries, as someone alluded to, Saturday night at midnight, and then I'll be closed until October. I can't remember when I said, I think 5th, because I'll be traveling for like 2 weeks there, and I want to catch up on the fulls that I've requested. The full manuscripts, not fools. I just wanted to clarify. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Everyone, stay safe. And every Wednesday night on this channel, me and my friend Bess host a write-in at 8 p.m. Eastern. So we, set a timer for 20 minutes and write, and then we chat for a little bit and we set a timer and so on and so on. And so I invite you to join us. Karen comes regularly. Jesse has been coming recently. Anna comes often. Jules is usually there. So yeah, just come and hang out with us and get some writing done. And have a good night, everyone. Bye.